Salute BookTube, welcome to my channel. Here we are, it's December 10th and I'm doing this November reading wrap up. Um, so we're almost in the middle of December and I'm doing the November reading wrap up, so I'm kind of behind. I've just been behind in everything, in life, in reading, in BookTube, everything. And again, regulars for this channel might know I was traveling for a big part of November, and that didn't allow me to read as much as I would have liked. And it also didn't allow me to booktube and watch and participate in booktube and make booktube videos. And that means I'm behind and I'm trying to catch up on the videos I missed. There's that. And then also coming into December, um, for those of you who don't know, I'm based in the United Arab Emirates, a country in the Middle East, and December 2nd was the National Day of the United Arab Emirates. It's kind of like the July 4th, what Americans have in July the 4th. It's the same idea. It's the national day, and it's a long holiday. And usually, long holidays means a lot of reading and catching up. But I did very little because you come back from your trip and there's from your travels, and there's a whole bunch of things to catch up on. Plus the long weekend, the whole national day. There's just a bunch of just things going on, and then we're in December. This is peak tourism season here where I'm at in the United Arab Emirates. A lot of European snowbirds are descending upon where I'm at, escaping the European cold. There are Americans too, but because America is much further, they don't come as much as Europeans. Uh, the weather is very ideal, good for beach time, good for catching some sun. The nights are very pleasurable. There's a lot of events. People want to be outdoors. It's a good time if you want to do outdoor activities, sports, outdoor sports. So not the ideal time to be sitting on an armchair in a stuffy library reading books. So I've been guilty of that as well, and that's affected my reading. And in normal circumstances, that wouldn't be much of a problem. But as you'll see now, I've read two books in November, which for me is a very low number. I think it's still, if you take it compared to world averages, it's incredible. But for us hardcore booktubers and booktube watchers and readers, two books is almost a sin. um, Very low number. But that's just the way it is. The travel, and I've mentioned it before, the circumstances of where I traveled to. I traveled to Iraq. I was in Baghdad. And for those of you who didn't see it, a couple of videos ago, I did a vlog of my Baghdad trip. I think the video is called A Visit to the Baghdad Book Market. You can check that out. I know that I had mentioned I left it just as a without any audio, without any commentary. I said if I get two comments saying make a version with commentary, I'll do it. And I got two comments, so I'm gonna do that as well. Again, I'm behind, but I'll repost the Baghdad book market vlog, and I'll add commentary this time. I just gotta sit down and do it. And again, it's been hectic time for me, so outside of reading and booktube in the real world, a bit hectic, so I'll get onto that. But like I said, only two books being read in November, and that's kind of low for me. If you've seen my previous monthly wrap up videos, it was supposed to be three. It was supposed to be four actually. Two books, fiction books that I was hoping to finish in November, which I haven't. And here we are on December 10th, and I haven't. One of them was Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? A Palliser novel, part of this Palliser series. I was reading this. It was a read along with Steve Donahue. Steve Donahue actually stopped this. He put it down and he said, "There's not enough time to finish this big book. It is a big book. We hardly got into it." Before he just put a pause and said, "We can't finish this in 2025. Maybe we'll restart it in 2026." When he did that, I also stopped reading. I said, "Okay, you know what? My life is as hectic now. It's not just hectic. It's again. This is a time to be outdoors. The summers here are like the winters in North America and Europe. It's but it's an opposite. It's extreme, an opposite. The same extremes, just the opposite extremes. It's really hot, and you can't do physical exercise or outdoor activities and stuff. But now's the time to do it. So anyway, so this I put it down and said, okay, maybe in 2026. So I DNF'd it, but I'll get back to it someday. That's for sure. It's just when is a question of when. The other one is also it was a Steve Donahue read along. It is from these. This is an anthology of different horror books: Frankenstein, Dracula, and Doctor Jekyll and Mister Hyde. Steve Donahue was reading Dracula, and there's a read along, and he actually finished it. But again, it's been so hectic for me. I wasn't able to just complete it. I got it started. I'm about halfway, and then it's been on pause now for a couple of weeks, more than a couple of weeks. So maybe in December I'll finish it. Just go back and watch Steve Donahue's read along videos and read it along with him. But another one I didn't finish that I hope to finish in December. So yeah, again, it's been that busy that I haven't finished books. But there were two books I did finish, although I finished them late. I did finish them and I started them in November. Again, the travel sort of uh, caused a lot of pauses, which wasn't ideal, especially for the first book I want to discuss. But I finally got it done, and it's long. It's 500 plus pages, and it's a very broad subject. It's again, regulars of my channel will know I've been reading this author's. There's four books I want to read in the last 4 months of the year. I've already completed two in September and October. There's this one I read in November, and then there's one more which I hope to read in December. But the author is Michael Burleigh, and the book is called Blood and Rage, and the subtitle is A Cultural History of Terrorism. Yeah, so this is what I read in November, and I finally finished it just today. Now I can discuss it, but what to discuss? Actually, it's very difficult for me to discuss this without going on and on because it's a cultural history of terrorism, but it's a global history, and it's a history, and it's also a modern current events sort of polemic as well at the same time. Because what Michael Burleigh does is first he goes into the historical roots of terrorism, and then he discusses, at the time was quite recent. This book is from 2005, I believe. 2008. 2008. So still September 11 was still fresh in the mind. The insurgency, the Iraq War, the Afghan War, the whole terrorism, the height of the war on terror was very fresh. So he goes to the historical and also when this book was published, the contemporary. So it's a very dense book, but a very interesting book. Probably now this is the third Michael Burleigh book. This is probably my favorite. I've given Michael Burleigh a bit of a hard time. He's a conservative author, although here he admits he's not a neocon. He's what he called a conservative realist, which I guess makes him a Trump. I don't know. This was written in 2008, way before there was a Trump phenomenon. But this book just goes again the history and then the current, and it's not a book you can just lightly read. It's got a lot of. It's well researched. So I've given Michael Burleigh a hard time because he's a conservative, and he's still his conservative biases all over this. And I argued with this book so much. But I will give it to him. It's well researched. Gives a lot of good lessons if you want to learn about how to combat terrorism. And it's quite broad. He starts. I actually made a list. I wrote it down because there's so much. The first part of the book he discusses the Irish independence movement and the terrorism related to that. Some can say the Irish invented terrorism, or there is ancient terrorism. He mentions that we're talking about the modern world. 19th century Ireland. That's when there was a lot of for the Irish, very simple farmers in a quite isolated island. to fight the British at the height of their empire required a sort of asymmetrical warfare. Um, they couldn't just battle the British on a on the high seas or on an open field with an army, so they had to resort to asymmetrical warfare. And then he discusses the Russian nihilists. He discusses the anarchists of the late 19th century, also the Russian nihilists of the late 19th century. And then he goes into he gets, World War One, World War Two. That's when terrorism takes a back seat. It becomes pretty much a war, tanks and men and infantry. So there's a break, but then it goes back into the post World War II era where terrorism makes a sort of a comeback. So he discusses the Palestinian Israel issue, um, the, and how that conflict started as a war, a terrorist war. There was not just the Palestinians who were fighting again an asymmetrical enemy with strong Western backing and trained, because a lot of the Zionists who made their way to Israel after the war were trained by European and American armies. But he also discusses the Israeli terrorists, the Stern Gang, the Levi Group, the Haganah, I believe is what they were called, who were really the precursors of the present day Likud party, which is has its roots in terrorism and with fascistic ideology. It's what I really want to do with this book is, because it's very hard for me to give an overview of this very broad history in just a few minutes. What I really want to do is actually I want to go through the chapter on Palestine, Israel, and I'm thinking I might do it. I might read it live and then add my commentary to show you how I argue with this author and how I argue with his ideas and with books. The only thing that precludes me from doing, which I don't know if I can do it, is if I read there's copyright issues. I'm scared I might get copyright infringement, or I might get a warning, or I might get canceled on YouTube. So I don't know if it's possible. The other thing is, if I want to title it, I'm going to have the word terrorism probably in the title. And that might also cause problems with YouTube. I'm not too sure. So I need to think about that. But I also want to discuss the next chapter after discussing the Palestine-Israel issue and how terrorism really birthed that conflict before the formation of the State of Israel. The lesser-known 1930s, 1920s, and 1930s in the Middle East, a subject that I'm interested in very much, and which doesn't get as much play as much more recent Middle Eastern events. The other part of the world he enters in is the Algerian what's the word? The war for Algerian independence, which again, you have the Algerian, a subjugated Algerian people fighting the mighty French Empire. The empire had pretty much died, but it was still, and although France was radically hurt by World War II, it was still a powerful country. And for just everyday Algerians to rid themselves, they had to use asymmetrical warfare, which is we now call terrorism. But the terrorism, again, wasn't just the Algerians. It wasn't Muslim Algerians killing French European colonial settler, fascistic European French colonial settlers, racist settlers. The European pied noir, the French colonialists in Algeria were also conducting terrorism as well. So that's why I give Michael Burleigh credit. He takes both sides. But again, I want to read that chapter and just go through it and show you how I argue with this book. So again, I'll see if I can do it. Maybe somebody in the comments can tell me if I should do it or if it's not a good idea. Because if I read, this is again copyright. So then it discusses, this book goes into Black September. I don't know how many people know Black September, but that's, again, this is Michael Burleigh trying to show that, it's the Arabs it's not just an Arab-Israeli issue, it's an Arab-Arab issue, because a lot of the Palestinians were driven out of the Holy Land, out of their homes. A lot of them went into refugee camps in Lebanon and in Jordan. And Black September discusses the war between the PLO, Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Liberation Organization, and their war with the central government of Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan, which is another Arabic government. He discusses that. And that era, and just about, this is really the 1970s. We're very much now in the 1970s. Algeria was the 50s and the 60s. The whole PLO, Black September, was the 1970s. The terrorism of the 1970s, the sort of PLO leftist, secular Palestinian terrorism. And the surprising thing is the Israelis created Hamas, the fanatical, fundamentalist Islamic right-wing sort of movement. Israel created that as a counter to secular leftist communist Palestinian terrorism. So that's interesting. That's the other big lesson I got out of this book. Actually, I'll leave that to the end. I just want to list the other things mentioned in this book, other events, terrorist events. There was the Italian-German terrorism of the 1960s and 70s. These were spoiled, sort of upper-class Europeans, just creating havoc against the capitalist order. I guess people who lived in that period might know it, but I was surprised how much murder, especially Italy. He discusses Italy for a long stretch of this book. Just the Italian sort of left against the capitalist, corporate, centrist party that controlled Italy for most of the second half of the 20th century. America and the CIA and other European powers kept Italy was a one-party state to keep Italy firmly within the Western camp and not to drift into communism. But anyway, it goes on to discuss, did I miss something? It discusses the Basques in Spain, ETA, the whole Spanish separatist movement, also using terrorism against the central government in Madrid. There's a big part of this book is Northern Ireland and the recent troubles, again, of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, until peace, really in the late 90s, was initiated and has calmed things down. Although who knows the future, because it was quite bloody, the Protestants and the Catholics, and that fine line between terrorism and criminality. It's mafias and gangsterism. Same thing in Italy. It's is it a army issue or is it a policing issue? It's a big part of this book. And then the final, this concludes, of course, with the rise of Islamic terrorism, especially Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, Afghanistan, and Al Qaeda is a global movement. They were in the Middle East, they were in Afghanistan, they were in Southeast Asia, and in places like Indonesia, and then of course in Europe. And then culminating with September 11th and the aftermath of September 11th. Of course, Michael Burley is English, so there's a big part of it is about Britain and Muslims in Britain and the whole 7/7 London bombings. So again, this book stretches all over the place. But the one thing I wanted to say, although I need to do a deep dive, I can't. I'm gonna summarize this book But one major thing I got out of this is how much the CIA and I mentioned Israel. Israel created Hamas or supported the rise of Hamas to counter. They supported Islamic fundamentalism to counter secular Palestinian liberation movements. The same thing in the U.S. By the Americans, the CIA. The Americans supported a lot of Islamic fundamentalism in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. As a counter to the Cold War, just Soviet communism. So they gave Islam a blank check, Saudi Arabia, and they supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which included Osama bin Laden, to just fight the Soviets. And it's not just in Afghanistan, there's other examples. Again, it's surprising. The Americans, there was I don't know if it was the American government, but certainly private American interests were supporting the Irish Catholic Republic against the Northern Irish Protestants. So there was that. I mean, there's just it's fascinating. The only way I can summarize it is fascinating. Although a long book, maybe a bit too broad, but I'm glad I read it. And again, maybe I'll go not chapter by chapter, but a few selected chapters. The one about Palestine, the one about Algeria, and then the one about the rise of Al Qaeda. If I can maybe read it with my commentary and with my arguments with the book, with the author, maybe I'll do it. I'm not sure, but again, this is Michael Burley's Blood and Rage, which I completed in November, and then I've got one more of his books to read in December. Um, Maybe I'll do a December TBR video separately. I was hoping maybe I could combine it, but again, I think in December I'm gonna read very few books. Again, it's gonna be another slow reading month, with the idea that in January I'll get back into a more regular rhythm. Um, the second book I read was part of the other book project I have that I've been doing this year, or at least the last 6 months, and that's reading books about the Caucasus region. I traveled to the Caucasus back in 2021, 2022, something like that, 2021, late 2021. And I picked up a lot of books, but I said to myself, I don't really need that many books about the Caucasus. So I said, I'm going to read them, keep the ones I want to keep, get rid of the ones I don't need to keep to make space in my shelves, because I'm slowly losing shelf space, and I need to cut down my library. So I started reading those books, and this is the last book related to the Caucasus. This one is by Nicholas Griffin, and it's called Caucasus in the Wake of the Warriors. Now, again, for those who don't know what the Caucasus is, actually the jacket copy, the cover copy, actually has a good explanation. It says the Caucasus is a jagged land with Turkey to the west, Iran to the south, and Russia to the north. The Caucasus is trapped between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. If it didn't already possess the highest mountain range in Europe, the political pressure exerted from all sides would have forced the land to crack and rise. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, Peter the Great, Hitler, and Stalin all claimed to have conquered the region, leaving it a rich but bloody history. It is a place in legend. Its place in legend is equally high profile. Noah's Ark is said to lie on the borders of Armenia. The Garden of Eden can be found in the south of Azerbaijan, and Prometheus was, for his sins, bound and tortured on the peak of a mountain in Georgia. Now the award-winning writer Nicholas Griffin combines narrative history with travelogue as he explores the Caucasus in search of the legacy of Imam Shamil, 19th century freedom fighter and guru of today's Chechen resistance. While tracing the history of the Caucasian bloodshed, Griffin finds himself present at the beginning of another Russian attempt to control the region. This enthralling, fiercely beautiful, and intermittently hilarious book lifts the lid on a little-known but crucially important area of the world whose future today as ever hangs in the balance. Now, this book is a bit dated. It's from 2001. So it is a bit dated, but, and again, it's a small book, but the author, Nicholas Griffin, does a good job of trying to cover the entire story in a short book. But I've been reading so many books about the Caucasus. I don't know if this is a good book to start with, because it's better to have a bit more background before you plunge into this. But what does it say? It says Nicholas Griffin is an author. There he is, Nicholas Griffin. Young at the time author. Nicholas Griffin was awarded a Betty Task Prize in 2000 for his first novel, The Requiem Shark, and his second novel, The House of Sight and Shadow, was published the same year. Born and bred in London, Nicholas now lives in New York. This is his first work of nonfiction. You can tell that he's more of a fiction. He's a good fiction writer. With nonfiction, it starts a bit slow, but he actually improves with time. As the book goes on, it gets better and better. But again, it's not a big book. And this book, again, the Caucasus, there's 3 countries in the Caucasus, 3 independent countries, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia. And those are called the Trans-Caucasus or the Southern Caucasus. This book deals more with the northern Caucasus, and that is the region of what is now, it's now part of Russia. It's called Chechnya. And Chechnya is a Muslim republic within the Russian Federation. So fiercely independent, again, mostly Muslim compared to the rest of Russia, which is predominantly Orthodox Christian. And there's been the 19th century was the expansion of the Russian Empire into Chechnya, and driving the Chechens or making the Chechens submit to Russian control. That's the historical background. The present day travel log. This is 19. He's discussing Chechnya and the Caucasus, the northern Caucasus, in the 1990s. This is when the Soviet Union has collapsed. Russia is pretty much on its knees. And then there's wars in Chechnya. Again, Russia is on its knees. Boris Yeltsin was a weak, alcoholic president who lost the war. Chechnya actually drove the Russian army out of Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. And there was talk of Chechnya becoming a separate republic, just like Azerbaijan or Georgia or Armenia, and drifting away from Russia. And this book ends around 1999. Russia comes back in the late 90s, and that's actually Vladimir Putin. Boris Yeltsin is pushed aside. This is the rise of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin made his name in the Chechen War. That's how he became popular in Russia and then assumed total power. He effectively just leveled Chechnya and made sure the talk of Chechen independence is put in the back burner. Let's just put it that way, because now Chechnya is, although it's a separate autonomous republic within the Russian Federation, it's still part of Russia. So that's what this book covers, mostly Chechnya. Very similar, the same characters, etc., came from this book, which I read last month in October, Let Our Fame Be Great, by Oliver Boloff. The subtitle is Journeys Among the Divine People of the Caucasus. This also discusses Chechnya in big, and much more recent, discusses Chechnya and the Chechen situation. Again, we see similarities. Chechnya, again, similarly, Ukraine is trying to be much more, Ukraine is an independent nation, but trying to join NATO and trying to stick its thumb into Russia. Very similar. Russia came in and used force to attempt to make the Ukrainians submit, just like they did in Chechnya. Similar kind of story. Yeah, there's definitely similarities. You can definitely see similarities and one thing you see, the way the Russians fight, they have a very simple. It's not very effective, but it's effective, but it's very has very little regard for casualties. On the Russian side, it's just keep piling. We have 300. We charge with 6,000. 5,000 of them get killed. We're going to come back 6 months later with another 10,000. Then we're going to attack again. We're going to attack again and again until we win. Doesn't matter how many soldiers we lose. At the end of the day, we're going to keep expanding. And we see that with Ukraine. They're playing and they just keep prolonging and prolonging and prolonging. And anyway, I found that interesting. The other thing I wanted to say about this book is, again, it ties back to what I was reading here about the terrorism, Michael Burley's terrorism, because Chechnya is also mentioned here, because the Islamic jihadists started to come in to play a role, although they were quickly, because again, Russian Islam is very different than Arab Islam, very different to East Asian Islam. There's no one unified Islam. It's such a broad religion. You can't put one kind of overarching Islam and unified. It's too broad and too geographically diverse. But there was a period when Islamic jihadist, Saudi, Wahhabist money was coming into this battle, That's discussed here. It's also discussed in Michael Burley's terrorism book. But again, what's interesting is, again, that's where the same message, it's quite clear in the 90s that America was supporting these jihadis, just as America and the West is supporting Ukraine to try to stick the finger into Russia, stick a thumb, a sore thumb into Russia's eye. I think the same thing was happening here. Beyond a doubt, there was CIA money supporting Chechen resistance after the fall of the Cold War to hurt Russia. And just like the Americans supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union, they did the same thing, I think, in Chechnya. They did the same thing. And they were supporting Islamic terrorism before Islamic terrorism came back and bit them in the behind on September 11th, most notably. So again, it's just I found that interesting as well. But again, the only complaint I have about this is it was the author's first nonfiction book. It's part travel log, but it's good in parts. The only issue is it's a bit dated. That's all. But it's still an interesting, fascinating read, educational or um, yeah, educational. You learn a lot about a very remote region of the world, a very isolated part of the world, but an important one. Um, Maybe the soft underbelly of Russia. But yeah, I wanted to also discuss what I'll read in December. I thought I could combine the two, but this is already half an hour. I'll make a separate TBR, what I'm reading in December. It's going to be very little books. Again, I don't want any runoff into January. I want to finish my December books in December so that I can start January with a new year and a clean slate, with no overhang from 2025. So I'll make a separate what I'm reading TBR for December. Although we're already well into December, I apologize for being late. Again, just a very hectic time, a time to be outdoors more. People are always inviting you out, etc. And it's hard to say no with the very pleasurable weather. And yeah, so this is 32 minutes. I'll wrap this up. I'll thank you for watching this. Again, my email is on every video. I also link to my Substack. If you want to read, I've written 2 articles on Substack. If you want to read them, it's completely free. Nothing, no commitment except to subscribe. But there's no subscription fee or anything like that. And yeah, I'll wrap this up. I'll say thank you, BookTube, and salute.